Welcome everyone. So myself, Jason Norat, Booyan, and Abe will be running through the manufacturing cloud demonstration as well as best practices and implementation. So I'm going to again bring up the next slide. A little bit about myself. I'm a consultant at IGNX, handling Salesforce implementations as a Salesforce certified administrator, focusing in the manufacturing marketplace. Booyan?
Good evening, everybody. My name is Booyan Thiagarajan. I'm a Salesforce MVP, marketing automation champion. I currently head the Salesforce practice for IGNX. We do a lot of work on higher ed, manufacturing, and financial services. Over to you, Abhay.
Thanks, Booyan. Good evening, everyone. This is Abhay Gupta. I'm a Salesforce consultant at IGNX, certified developer, and good hands-on experience in Salesforce integration. And I'm here to walk through some admin and best practices in manufacturing cloud, along with that, like some use cases and what product you need to prefer in market, like manufacturing cloud. Hand over to Jason.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining, and thanks Booyan and Abe for delving in a little bit about yourselves. So the agenda of what we're going to cover today, the first and foremost is what is manufacturing cloud and why would we use this as opposed to using our current Salesforce organizations. The terminology that you may hear throughout our demonstration. So we're going to run through a few key terms that we find very helpful when going through this. We're going to go through the demonstration itself as a sales representative, as a sales manager, and as a Salesforce administrator in that order. And we're going to focus in on one of the key objects inside of manufacturing cloud, which is sales agreement, which we'll talk a little bit more about in just a few minutes, and leveraging account-based forecasting. So this is something that's definitely unique to manufacturing cloud as we talk about run rates and new business and when to leverage opportunities and when to leverage sales agreements. And then Booyan, our MVP for Salesforce, is going to be talking about best practices when implementing, highlighting integration, and just some things to consider. And then we'll talk at the very end and have a little bit of time for some questions and anything that's just outstanding. All right, so what is manufacturing cloud and why should we use it for our organization? So this as a whole helps align the sales and operation teams much, much better than some of the other organizations that use just Salesforce and leverage opportunities for every single piece of business that they actually bring on board. So instead of using opportunities for that, we could start using sales agreement. And what that will allow us to do is use the run rate business and manage everything through the sales agreements. We can easily capture volume and revenue for the accounts, and we can just track account performance from inception to renewal. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. And some of the key terms that you'll hear Abe, Booyan, and myself use throughout today is sales agreement, which I've already touched on just a little bit. This will allow the users to plan their sales and operations much more efficiently, and they can track transactions, profits, and revenue margins and make that more predictable. And we will use this for run rate business. So run rate business is bringing on any additional business for an existing customer. So if you've got customer A and they are continuing to create new orders and order more products from your organization, we're going to start using the sales agreement object to track that run rate business. Any new business may be a different spin-off of that company who we're trying to track a little bit different, and it's a new business group. We may use the new business side of things, which is more inclined to use opportunities within Salesforce. Salesforce. Then we can use the account-based forecasting tool, which will then allow us to look at company A or whatever company we may be looking at and take a look at that and say, okay, if we planned for 5,000 products to be sold within 2021, what does this look like versus the actuals? What does this look like from a sales agreement standpoint, and just tracking it at a higher level so that way management gets a better feel for what's actually going on for the operational side of things and the sales side of things. Booyan, care to elaborate just a little bit more?
Okay, thank you, Jason. So as I'm aware that most of the folks who are watching this presentation might be admins or developers or even architects. One of the key things as Jason was talking about is, why manufacturing cloud, right? And as you know, from a Salesforce strategy standpoint, Salesforce is moving more industry focused. And one of the products, if you are working for a manufacturer or if you want to do more work for manufacturing companies, is manufacturing cloud. Now, before this, Salesforce never had a standard product. And so what happened was most of the manufacturers, ended up using accounts, contacts, and opportunities for everything. Now, there is a separate line of business for manufacturers, which is called run rate business. What is a run rate business? It is manufacturers typically sells products for multiple companies for a period of time, say 3 years, 5 years. You might have a contract, and you might be selling, let's say a bunch of chemicals on a monthly volume based, and that's the contract. And it could be 5 tons every month, or it could be 5 million every month, and that's the way these contracts are tracked. And prior to this, manufacturers tend to use opportunities for these contracts, even though on the back end, they usually have an order management solution like an ERP. That's where the orders get into that. So it was an overkill to create, for every order, every opportunity. That was a challenge. So with manufacturing cloud, they don't need to do that. They just use this one standard object called sales agreement, which again is kind of a replica of your contract. And from there, you just import the orders from your ERP system. So that's a little bit of a nutshell of how manufacturing cloud will work in your run rate business. If you can move to the next slide, Jason. And again, this slide is a typical on a business process for manufacturers. As you can see, from manufacturers, when they start from a lead to a prospect and till the end life cycle, where this manufacturing cloud fits in from a business process standpoint is really on the contract to order. So you sell to a company, you have a contract for 3 to 5 years. And after the contract is signed, you now have to start shipping those products monthly. And so that's where it's typically sales and sales operations. One of the pain points for salespeople really is to track, how am I doing on a month-to-month level, because they don't go to the ERP system. And sometimes manufacturers also use another system for doing forecasting. So the easiest way for Salesforce makes it happen for manufacturing cloud is now once you get your orders in, your sales agreement in, you could quickly track how your orders are doing, how your contract is doing on a month-to-month and year-to-year. And with this COVID-19 scenario, you could do some upsells, which will really help to increase the sales. If you can go to the next slide, Jason. Okay, again, the value, the business, the reason on using manufacturing cloud, one, you could track your revenues more better because of your run rate business. Secondly, you could also see which products to upsell, which increase sales. And secondly, the other thing is also your supply chains, which are really disrupted now. There are some products which are on demand now, like COVID scenario, PPP equipment and all that. A lot of manufacturers are pivoting towards those products. And for that, they need to make, contract with the suppliers, order parts ahead. So it helps them to manage the inventory and also kind of make the business itself, agile to make this happen. If you can go to the next slide, Jason. Now I'll turn it over to Jason to kind of do a demo. Go ahead, Jason.
And once I'm bringing this screen over, everyone should be able to see a manufacturing cloud sandbox environment. So what we hope to achieve with this demonstration should be as a sales representative, as a sales manager, and as a Salesforce admin. Those are the roles that we're taking as this. And we will start as John Smith, who is a sales representative who wants to take a deeper dive into one of his accounts in particular. and take a look at what's been going on inside of the run rate business, as their company has just started using sales agreements. And what we'd like to do, and this is something that as an administrator, Abe will touch on later on in this demonstration, we can talk about setting up page layouts, list views, and things of that nature. So again, as John Smith, I've now navigated to the list view that's called Apex Hours Account Demo. He wants to take a look at a specific account, demo number 7. And he wants to see, okay, so he is actually the account owner of this, which is great. And it's going to allow him to then look into the relate section, as well as some of these other tabs, which we'll touch on in a minute. And his manager is actually going to take a look at. So John says, okay, I see that there's one sales agreement that has a start date of the 1st of this past year. So it's in draft status. So he knows from what his business has told him that no orders have actually been placed against that sales agreement. And he says, okay, maybe there was some oversight here. So he takes a look and clicks into the sales agreement. So this new object that's in Manufacturing Cloud, and he says, okay, account 7 has this one sales agreement that's also called account 7 sales agreement purchases. And it looks like there's a planned quantity for 2020 for 600 products of the Panasonic 002. But he realizes that there's no actual quantity related to any of those throughout all of 2020. And he clicked on the show all schedules because that's all he has access to right now. And he says, okay, well, let me talk back to the business from the operations side of things. He hears back from them, and they've told him there was an order that was started, but unfortunately, no one was able to put it into the Salesforce system. So he takes a look in the related section and says, okay, I can see that there's a product, the Panasonic 2. I see that the sales price is $3,000 and the initial total quantity, which is the planned amount for 2020 that was entered at the beginning of the year, was 600 with a 5% discount percentage. And you're going to see this discount percentage come into play in just a few moments. So he says, okay, well, this is still in draft status. I'm going to change this into the approved status, which will then allow me to start tagging orders. And one thing to take into account is the fact that since the start date was January 1st, 2020, and it was every month they would like to see in the schedule count is 12. That means we're going to look at the tabs inside of that agreement terms tab up here, and it's going to be one record for each month. So once I click approve and hit save, I now can click on agreement terms. There's now a recalculate actuals button, because once I tie this to an order, then we're going to be able to track planned versus actual amounts. So once I create this new order, I've already gotten permission from the operations team to go ahead and do this and tie this to the same account that we were looking at beforehand. I then clicked on this. I said, okay, this is good enough for me. There was an order actually in November coming from, it was placed on November 1st, 2020. And once I've done that, I can click save. It creates that new order. I then go in, and again, I've gotten all my information from the operations team as John. And I said, okay, there's no order amounts, and I can see that I need to add, it's in the draft status, and I need to add a product. And we talked about Panasonic 002. So what I'm going to do here is check that off, hit the next button. And there was an order, the operations team has told me that there were 50 units of, or the quantity was 50. And that was all done in November of 2020. I now see that order product on here, which is the same order product that's on the sales agreement and the same one that I'm interested in. I can now mark this order as complete, just like we're retroactively post-dating this. And then I'm going to go back to the details. I'm going to click on that sales agreement. That's the one I'm interested in, seeing the variance, and my manager's interested in seeing the variance between the two. And then this is kind of, you know, where as I switch the role as a manager, and now I am Rob, and I am very curious to see, after what John's done, what the actuals are compared to the planned quantity. If I click on this recalculate actuals now, and I click on past and current schedules, because John was the one who actually made those edits. So he made them for November of 2020. And we know that the sales agreement started in January of 2020 and is supposed to go for the entirety of the year. Once I click on recalculate actuals, I'll notice that there's a notification at the top right that will let me know when everything is complete. As you can see, this will happen for any of the edits that we make within the account terms tab. Once I hit refresh, we now can see that the actual quantity changed, and I can see that in November 2020, which is when I started the order date, that there were 50 units that were actually ordered. Now, if I do the show across all schedules, you'll notice that, okay, because there's no orders for each of these months, and one of, you know, these are one of 12, that 50 is only showing up in November, and that's good enough for us to start doing some analysis, especially as Rob as the manager. And he's trying to think to himself, okay, where did things go wrong? We planned for 600 or 550 short in terms of projections, and this is something that he can then go back to his team and maybe even at the account level and start, you know, handling that. He can also do a mass update if he thinks that, okay, that product is a little bit, you know, we gave a 5% discount on that product. We could actually increase that by 5% just for that particular product. So let's go 10% just to make it a little bit easier. And he says, okay, I just want it for Panasonic 002. In some situations, some of our other sales agreements may have 2 to 3 products. So we do have that option up here. And once I click use as a percentage, hit save, I can then do the same refresh on this. And you'll notice that that number changed, that planned amount price changed. The quantity didn't change because I'm just touching the actual percentage off. So now we say, okay, because we changed the planned amounts, going forward, when we do our forecasting and planned quantity amounts for this particular accounts and this particular sales agreement going forward, let's try to make that discount a little bit more. That way we can meet that goal of 600 in the planned quantity. And that way next year, our actual quantity is much, much closer or even exceeds this. Then you'll notice that I haven't touched too much on the forecast quantity, which is down here. And the forecast quantity is tied to forecast amounts. And that's something that we're going to touch on in just a moment or two as Rob navigates back to the accounts in which this all started. So one thing to keep in mind is that that actual amount of 150,000 is definitely important to him. So Rob's going to take a step back and look at this from an account level. All right. As we're going in here, he then said, okay, we already talked about this one particular sales agreement for one particular order, and I want to do a little bit of forecasting. Well, first off, he has the permission, which Abe, as the administrator, will talk about adding. But he says, okay, we expect this demo account number 7 to grow 10% in the next year. and we expect the market to grow the same. You can hover over either of these, especially he already knows what's going on, but this is good for any user. We can generate the account forecast, and he's then met with a screen that looks just like this. And if we hit the refresh button on this, we can now see all of the sales agreements tied to this particular account. So a very high level of what's going on with demo 7. Now, in this particular instance, I've only had one sales agreement thus far. So if I were to go back and add, which he's going to do in just a moment, because there was another account or another sales agreement rather that needs to be added. And it's something that John, as the sales representative, didn't have enough information at the time to add, but now he's taking a look at that. And before we do that, he does want to do one other thing. He wants to take a look at the growth, and he wants to make a change to that. So we can actually change that right within the tool. So that 10%, we said it's inaccurate. We can just click show growth. We can do a mass update. So that forecasted quantity, we can change, we can increase it, we can decrease it or replace it. So he can even do this. He can even add a value for the forecasted quantity and change it. So if we take a look at this, how forecasted quantity is 0 here, and I do a mass update, and I replace that with 700. And we're doing this for all products, but in particular, we can just do it for this. I can do that, and then I can recalculate. We get the notification up here, and now we've got our forecasted quantity out for each of the months going forward for the next year. And this is something that, you know, if you hover over and you want to revert back, we can absolutely do that. And especially in this case, Rob says, okay, well, I'm talking about 2021, but December is not really accurate, even though it technically is 12 months out. So I say, okay, let's just reset this. And once I do that, I've changed it back to 0 because that's more realistic for December 2020, since there's no orders for this particular sales agreement. And then he's got his updated. Then as I navigate to the relate section, and as we mentioned, there was one more sales agreement that I actually need to take to retroactively push into the system. So he says, okay, we're still in the draft mode. I'm adding a sales agreement from the account object in that particular record. So there's not too much going on here. And I say, okay, sales agreement demo 15, and this is purchases to make it a little bit more realistic. And I want to do this for 2018. 2019 was covered with the edit that was made by John Smith, but now I'm looking a little further back and I say, okay, I want to do May 2018, and I want to do a monthly frequency of those columns in the agreement term section. And I just want to do for 6 months. And I don't have to touch the end date because this monthly and this schedule count is going to automatically push this 6 months out. So this is going to be November 2018. That is the term length of this sales agreement. I'm going to make sure that this is pulling the products rate and the pricing right from the specific price book that I want, which is called Apex Hour Price Book. In the John Smith example, the sales rep already had this already created. He was just editing the orders attached to the sales agreement. But this is from inception, and this manager has access to create that sales agreement. You then click save. We've got the new sales agreement. We can click on this, and we notice that there's nothing here in the sales agreement section. Well, there's a reason for that. There's a reason for that is because no products have been added to it. So we now say, okay, the Canon G50 needs to be added to the sales agreement for the planned amount. So we had a planned amount. We heard back from the operations team that in 2018 we expected 800 to be ordered, and it was at a 4% discount percentage. Now that we've got that in here, we said, okay, that's the planned amount. We've added all we needed to add. And I now need to change this draft status, just like the orders, to approved. And as the manager, I have the ability to do that. Then click Save. And you'll notice now that I can see that Canon D50. And now I can also add orders. Before this was finalized and approved, I couldn't add any orders or contracts for that matter. Once I go into the new order, just like we mentioned before, we do the same process. I'm tying it to the same account. That way I can see all sales agreements tied to that. And then I find myself going into the order start date. And we already mentioned that it goes from May 2018 to November 2018. So I'm going to take this back and I'm going to go for September of 2018. And we said that we want to find, so bear with this as it loads, and Rob is just waiting, and he clicks into that order. He sees still in draft mode, just like we saw before, as the sales representative. And he says, okay, now I need to add the actual amount that was ordered for September. He clicks on that. And we mentioned that there was 800 projected in that 6-month time frame. And it looks like he's ordered 200, or the client has ordered 200. Once that's calculated, we can then look into the mark status as complete field, navigate back to that particular sales agreement, recalculate our actuals, past and current. If we're going for future, Rob's just going to use the current schedule. We're going to see that take effect. We're going to look to see September. We see 200 were sold in September. And then we're going to navigate back to our account. You can either go back to the details page, or you can just navigate up here. And Rob can now see 2 sales agreements tied to this particular account. And he can now update any of the forecasts that he needs to by adding products here or simply recalculating. And this is basically everything Rob needs to do to demonstrate that he's taken a look at the variances. He's now forecasting out for 2021. He has all the information he needs for this particular account of his for 2018 and 2019. And he has a pretty good idea of what they're ordering, how much of it they're ordering, how much our projections have been off for the last 2 years, and what that looks like going forward. And he almost doesn't have to even leave, click on any tabs up here. He just navigates all directly through the account object. And if he has Einstein Analytics and any of the other add-ons that Abe is going to talk about in just a few moments, then he could do some reporting, some dashboards, and some more complicated forecasting related to that. Before I hand it over to Abe, I do want to show you what this looks like for an account. So now breaking the character of Rob, and we just want to see what this looks like for account number 3. And we want to specifically look at one of the sales agreements tied to this. We were only editing orders that had 1 order out of the 6 months or the entire year. And to make it a bit more realistic, if I click on all schedules, you'll notice that we've got our actual total for the duration of this sales agreement, which is for a complete year of 2020. And you can see that here are the actual amounts of those orders that were placed. This one's much more realistic, closer to our goal of our planned quantity. And it's just something to take into consideration as something that you can just easily click the show all schedules, and you'll have everything at your fingertips. And then lastly, account number 2, if we move over to that particular account, you'll see that the ownership for this is with myself as the manager. And you can see that I can actually, if I click into this particular sales agreement, I can actually clone this sales agreement, or I could renew it. So if we said, okay, the same account is, re-upping for the next year, the term of that sales agreement, that engagement was only 6 months, and now we need to renew that, I can just click this renew button and edit whatever I need to, and we're set for the next 6 months or the next 12 months, whatever the case may be. So all capable as long as we have the permissions to renew, edit, and clone in this particular instance. And if there's anything else that I'm missing, Abe, from those 2 accounts, or just in terms of what's going on with the account-based forecasting, please let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to turn things over to you to give some insight into the administrative side of Manufacturing Cloud.
Thanks, Jason. Almost you cover everything. I like to add one more point in renew. When you click renew button, the existing sales agreement is going to completed, and new sales agreement is going to created automatically with the same product. So that's, I think you cover almost everything. So I begin as a salesman admin, Manufacturing Cloud come with basically 2 products. One is Sales CRM Manufacturing Cloud, and another is Sales and Plus Service Cloud Manufacturing Cloud. The Einstein package is add-on, as this is separate licensing and product. To key feature why Manufacturing Cloud play into picture when we get in integration mode, to combine with ERP system and Manufacturing Cloud, complete the supply chain with the operation team. Manufacturing Cloud play a key role in that. First thing we need to how you're going to provide permissions to your sales team or your manager. So in there is no key profile, but there's one key profile we need to maintain. It's account manager. How the manage role hierarchy will play in the picture.
And Abe, is there certain permissions that you need before getting into the roles for each of the users that are actually using Manufacturing Cloud?
Yes, there's can you scroll down a little bit? Yes. So for manufacturing sales agreement, is the key permission set for all the sales rep. You're going to provide powerful sales agreement tab, account based forecasting. So we need to provide this permission set to those users. And along with that, you need to add one more permission set. It's called manufacturing account for forecasting. So these 2 permission set, you need to note it down and give permission to the user. As a manager, you need to provide access to account targeting profile set.
Fantastic. And is that something that you mentioned the roles, is that something that needs to be adjusted?
Yes.
Okay. And so
how role hierarchy will create in that when you create manager sales rep. So basically manager will view all the record from the sales team.
Fantastic. Thanks. And is there anything from a page layout standpoint that stands out to you that may need editing for any of the administrators who are looking to provide for their managers on the sales team and then their sales representatives?
Before to page layout, like to add one more point, and this whole manufacturing cloud will work only in Lightning. So first of all, if any customer is using classic environment, it will not work. You need to convert those customers first into Lightning environment. And page layout, these are like more on organization level, how the customer is going to like sometime you need to automate your opportunity. Like once your opportunity is closed, then automatically sales agreement need to create, or you need to add a contract in that. For some organization, contract will play more key role. Based on contract, your sales agreement will process, and how you're going to add your order. So these are more on organization level configuration, but most of the parts cover in manufacturing cloud out of the box functionality.
Fantastic.
Like sales agreement is the key object. These are the standard object. Order, contract. When you give permission to your sales rep, it automatically like process, all the process are defined. First you need to create sales agreement, give the sales agreement need to approved by your manager, or whatever the approval process you need to set, like one step approval process or second step approval process based on your amount. After that approval process, you can add your actual order. Same way, your account forecasting will play key role in your forecasting environment.
And you're referring to this sales agreement item in the setup area, is that correct?
Yes. There's like a couple of configuration you need to add. Like renewal will play 60 days. How you're going to upload your orders? It's like batch processing or real time. You can like from ERP system, you can integrate with like orders opportunity in real time, or as a like daily batch cycle you can implement also.
Okay, and you can even do the agreement for metrics right from within here for editing.
Yes, like the second approval process, if you want to create like out of the box approval process, or through automatic, like once you click any checkbox, approval process will create a send email notification that you need to implement through this setting. And there's one more like, can you click on forecasting, account forecasting? Yeah. So in the account forecasting, like how monthly you need to divide, it's like quarterly, monthly, yearly, on which basis you're going to forecast your upcoming product and pricing view. Can you go down? And there is a formula in between. Go down a little bit. Yeah, add formula. So these are like organization level setting, how you're going to calculate your quantity. Like quantity is going to calculate based on your actual some percentage. So you need to define this formula here, and it automatically, like when you click account forecast, it calculate based on these formula.
Fantastic. And this account forecasting, is there anything that separates this from what's going on with the account manager targets? I noticed that's something that is on the record for everything related to an account. Is that something that with Einstein Analytics, is that kind of where that comes into play?
Yes, these like account manager target is basically for manager to see their upcoming forecast, do some analytic like analysis on their product and pricing or information. So these settings are more related to higher management or manager or business analyst for their organization. Um, their particular permission set. So all the sales rep is not like willing to work on upcomings or future thing. Um,
Fantastic.
uh,
And for anyone who is wondering about what I may be referring to for account manager targets, it is related to the actual accounts, and it's the account manager targets tab. And as you can see right now, there's no targets assigned to me. And the other item that Abe was discussing, which is separate, is the forecasting administrative side of things, which everything can be then seen in this forecast tab for the accounts. So don't mean to derail you, Abe. Just wanted to do
yeah.
on the front end.
And I like to add one more point for like for doing migration stuff. You can use Genset and migration tool or Salesforce DX, and it's very compatible with this tool. And along with the third-party integration, you can use Delboomi, Jitterbit, directly interact with the ERP system or SAP system.
Fantastic. Is there anything else you needed to or wanted to add for any of the administrators that are listening into this Apex Hour session?
I think we almost cover everything.
I would agree with that. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Booyan from our team, and he is going to close things out with all things related to the actual integration itself.
All right. Thank you, guys. And again, as you guys can see, right, the manufacturing cloud product, it's a standard package, right? And it's got its own features. The sales agreement is a core object, and the other objects kind of falls into play. One of the questions, obviously, now comes implementation, right? When we get to implementation, there are two scenarios. One, you might be a manufacturer. You already have Salesforce. You already are using opportunities. You're using the standard contracts and orders. Now, how do I fit this in with manufacturing cloud? So that's one question. And secondly, for those who are just new to Salesforce, then how do I go about implementing? So for those who are already out there and you're using opportunities and opportunity products already, then the way this would work is think about this as a sales agreement is a one-to-one with typically an opportunity. So there are two ways to kind of think about it. One, if it's you got to go back to the business and say, okay, out of my opportunities, which are the opportunities which are my run rate opportunities versus the opportunities which are like new logos. In other words, if I'm selling to a new account or I'm doing a cross sell or an upsell, that's opportunities. But if you're just doing repeat orders every month to the same account again and again and again, those opportunities at some point will be ported over to sales agreement. So there is an interim phase and a future phase. In the interim, you create a sales agreement and a sales agreement product, and then you kind of manage your orders, which are then linked to the sales agreement. But the future phase, at some point, there would be a phase where you would retire your opportunities and just use sales agreement and orders for your run rate business. So that is just one thing to consider when you are using an existing org and using heavily opportunities. If we can go to the next slide, Jason. And then for the second part of it, for those architects out there, the question should be is, okay, what is this data model, right? The data model is very simple. The sales agreement is your master object. It's got a one-to-many with the sales agreement product and product schedule. You might see there's a sales agreement product schedule here, whereas in the standard Salesforce, there is the product schedule and the revenue and the quantity schedule. Salesforce kind of moved away from that because it doesn't work for the manufacturing world. So you might be having your own sales agreement product schedule, which you need to kind of factor for it. So that's one thing to kind of understand. Obviously, you need to use your products and price book, which are very important. Let's go to the next slide. This one, when Abe was talking about forecasting, so which basically means for your future years, typically sales managers want to see, okay, what is my volume looking like for 2021, 2022. And when Jason walked through those account forecasting tab and those forecasting records, this is the objects: the account forecast, product forecast, and account forecast. Those kind of product Salesforce built in. So the other question normally will come in, like, what happens to the standard Salesforce forecasting? Well, the standard Salesforce forecasting may not work for the manufacturing cloud, which again builds into your own forecasting. And the other question to think about is, typically manufacturers have a separate product to do forecasting. So what do I do about that? Well, you would continue to use your forecasting tool, but the question really is minimal data to put to your sales team to have that visibility. So you might end up using minimal forecasting, and you can use those formulas Abhay had talked about for that. So let's go to the next slide. So now let's talk about scenarios on implementation. Obviously, when we get to implementation, right, the product looks good, the demo has been done, and what did the business expect? They want everything tomorrow morning, right? I mean, honestly, tomorrow morning is something challenging, right? So what we want to do is, I want to talk about three scenarios actually. Scenario one, what can you do minimal and to get the product up there and make it running, right? So that was always the best thing. So what I call this the use case one, which is the a quick POC, 4 to 6 weeks implementation, and then the use case two is a full blown, because as Abhay said, there is a backend integration because your orders are coming from ERP. You already have your ETL tools running, Jitterbit, Delboomi, whatever tool you have. That will, and even SAP at this point. So that will be a heavy lift. So that will be your phase two, which is the use case two. And then use case three is talking about migration. So let's go to the next slide, Jason. So let's talk about a minimal implementation, what you can do now. You have an existing Salesforce org. You are already having accounts, contacts, opportunities, and all that. Focus on the discovery, which is focused on what is a sales agreement. How do I create that object? How do I customize it for my needs? So that means you might be already having a CPQ solution sometimes, which might kind of have some fields in sales agreement. Or sometimes you might have an ERP system where there is an agreement there. You might need to port some fields. The key fields are start date, end dates, and then how do I link it to my orders? So and then instead of implementing products and price books are challenging, right? Because for manufacturers, you might have millions of products. So do I just need to put all my products? No, you might need to do a minimal category, or you might go by business unit. So maybe implement for one business unit. But when you do this implementation, one of the things which is very important is to have a roadmap for integration, because you need to make sure all the fields in Salesforce, the sales agreement products are mapped to the corresponding integration objects. Let's say it's in your ERP system. That's number one. Number two, the key, make sure there is a synchronization key, like SAP customer ID, or if there's a contract ID in your external legacy system, which needs to be put in sales agreement so you can sync it up. So those are small strategies which you can do to get a use case one for a POC. I mean, I would definitely advise not to extend this beyond 3 months. Minimal integration changes, mostly on sales agreement. Start with minimal products which are most viable, and then keep it, again, Salesforce and the products. You can't have, if you're using SAP, you have 7-level hierarchies, you may not work. So start with 2 or 3. Let's go to the next slide. The use case 2 is, okay, now I got my phase 1 implementation done. What do we do in terms of integration? Because as you can see, you have to get all your products, all your price books, the entire catalog. Should I get everything in Salesforce? The answer to that question is, again, it would be dependent on what the sales team has to see. You might only go into like maybe a category level, not all the products, and like a level 1, level 2, high level categories. So that is one thing to think about. And then for the second aspect of it is historic data. So what should we do with the existing opportunities? So let's say we go implement in 2021, and then what do we do with 2015, 2010 orders opportunities? So that is, again, a phase 2 part. So we have to plan out how to do a data migration for this. As you can see from here, the major object for you to think about, the middle layer is your integration layer. The left end is where your sales agreements, everything comes in, which gets into Salesforce. And then the products, price books, accounts, and orders are the core objects to think about. Let's go to the next slide, Jason. So, and again, if you're using a MuleSoft, there are some predefined templates, connectors already from MuleSoft to SAP. So that could be a thing to use. If you're upgrading to SAP HANA, there is also an existing Lightning connector real time. So that is also an option to think about. So let's go to the next slide. So now, sometimes some manufacturers use packages, managed packages like Eno6 or Overcast. And what these packages do is they're already connected to the ERP system like SAP or BOM, and they exactly replicate that object schema in Salesforce. So in that kind of case, there might be some changes to the managed package, but you want to minimize that and abstract it, keep it at the Salesforce level. As long as you can populate the Salesforce agreement, the forecasting objects, and you have automation in place to kind of take the managed package products objects to Salesforce, we are good on that. Let's go to the next slide. And the other aspect to think about is ETL tools. If the volume is high, you might need to kind of consider, in a piecemeal approach, because ERP orders could be high volume, governor limits are a challenge, so we need to kind of think about that. Can we go to the next slide? The last piece of it is, okay, for existing opportunities, which may be 2010, 2015, you might have dumped it into some custom objects. You might have to recreate the sales agreements from that. So what that means is a data mapping exercise where you might have to go and map all the existing objects and fields what you use to the corresponding sales agreement, recreate the sales agreement products, and then link them back up again. So this would be like a use case 3 where this would be a data migration. So from an implementation standpoint, always start from the future. So let's go create new sales agreements and do that. That's a quicker implementation. Then do the integration, which is the phase 2 part, and then do the data migration. So that's the 3 use cases. If you can go to the next slide, Jason. Then the last part of it is a data load. So, okay, now let's say if I have to really do like my legacy data, historical data, what's the sequence I need to import this data in? And obviously that accounts, contacts, and then account products, sales agreement products, and product schedule. So that's how the sequence would be. This might be a one-time job you might build in your ETL tool. And at some point, you will probably have to replicate this as a regular job if you have to do that. So that is one thing to consider from a data load sequence standpoint. So let's go to the next slide. So and to kind of summarize, always think about manufacturing cloud implementation with a small POC. Again, minimal products, minimal agreements to start with. The very important critical piece for a manufacturing cloud implementation is that you have to leverage products and price books. Most of the manufacturers tend not to use it. They got one product and one price book, which may work, but in the long run, you need to kind of load it. But again, you don't need to be crazy to load all your million products there. You could just go with the category higher level products and keep it. And then the other one is an integration strategy with your ERP system, which is your orders, products, and price books. So that is another thing which you need to consider. And the last piece is the pricing aspect. The question would be, should every sales cloud license to be converted to a manufacturing cloud license? Because obviously there's pricing in it. And usually, manufacturers who have, maybe 100 sales cloud license, maybe 1,000 service cloud license. But with manufacturing cloud, usually run rate business is done by minimal users because it's sales operations who really want to get access to it. And sales teams might get access to it. I might get in trouble when I talk about this from a Salesforce standpoint. But the point is that you can start with minimal users who really need it. And then for them, it's a manufacturing cloud license. It can be an upgrade, or it could be permission sets, which Abhay had talked about. So let's go to the next slide. So to summarize this, as I kind of talked about, we've done a lot of implementations in manufacturing cloud. I have a quick start assessment kit, which I'd be happy to share. I have also a blog which talks about best practices as well. This is my blog a little bit. And then can we go to the next slide? I talk about the key features, and then this assessment kit would help you to do some impact analysis on this. I think we are at the end of it. I think we are done at this point.
Yep, absolutely. And this is Jason again, and I wanted to take this time to answer, any questions and outstanding items that we may not have covered as thoroughly.
Thank you. That's really great demo. And so there was one question, like once you go to the sales agreement, there was some calculation screens and everything was there. So that all were out of the box from the manufacturing cloud, or like there is some customization we did. Can you go back to the same screen if you don't mind?
Absolutely. And to answer that question, that is out of the box. There is customization that you can add to it, but for what we went through in the actual demo, there was no customization other than the manual edits that I made to that particular sales agreement. And
Right.
if we go back to that particular sales agreement that you may be referring to, there was these recalculations and these buttons and actions are actually inherently built into Manufacturing Cloud. And that's why when I click on the recalculate actuals, I give it just a moment, refresh the agreement terms, and then I'm off and running. And that
Right.
is out of box.
So
Right.
like this, on this particular page, we have a mass update. If we want to hide this button, so that's a configurable, or what is that?
So those,
Fine. Go ahead.
right. So those are like Lightning components at this point, Amit. So we can customize certain actions. Again, these are quick actions, which kind of show up as buttons. So there are certain pieces which are configurable. And then just to kind of summarize that question, so these metrics which Jason is talking about, these are standard metrics. And Abhay talked about a formula, right? So if some manufacturers might have their own custom metrics. So what you can do is, if you have your custom metrics, you can create a formula. Again, it's kind of like a formula field, point and click, and you could do those calculations too. So that's another way to think about it. Amen.
I got it. And apart from that, like initially I was having a doubt for data structure, but that you already showed, like what is the data model we have. So pretty much
Okay.
that's it from my side.
Hey, Amit, I'd like to add, sorry, Bhuvan, sorry to interrupt you.
Right.
Like these buttons are driven through permission set, like recalculate actuals are more for a manager, like when we give this permission to any user based on this permission set, then you can play around with this permission and get to know which button get access to say manager, which button get access for sales rep.
Okay.
Perfect. And just one more question, like there is any open documentation or something is available for anyone like who want to learn about this? And the second question, if I want to learn Marketing Cloud, is that Marketing Cloud sandbox is available free of cost or only available to the partner or customers?
Great question. So there are trailheads, Amit, for Manufacturing Cloud, where you could get access to it. But at this point, I think the access to a sandbox or a dev environment is very limited because this product has just been 2 years now in existence. The best way to kind of reach out is go through the partner portal. If you're a partner, you can get access to the whole dev environment, which we showed. But if you're a customer, obviously you need to talk to your account rep to get some kind of a license. I mean, they will do some kind of upgrade for a small period of time. Obviously, the account rep would be the right person to answer it. But there is plenty of trailheads now with Manufacturing Cloud itself. And you would also notice like summer, spring, winter 21 release, they also go through the same release schedule. And they have Manufacturing Cloud as a separate section now in your release notes as well.
Perfect. So I guess pretty much, yeah. Here's a link for Trailhead. So definitely we will share this link in the recording so that our audience can look into that. And that's it.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Amit, for giving us this opportunity.
Yes. Thank you so much.
For the
Yep.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.